This video is a definitive guide on using MicroPython on ESP32 microcontrollers. Now, if you are thinking of using MicroPython or learning how to use MicroPython, then you have really found the right video. So when you are going to use MicroPython for an ESP32 microcontroller, you need to also consider that there are two other options, two other ways in which you can use an ESP32. You can namely use the Arduino IDE and program it that way. Also, you can, if you're an advanced user, you probably are looking into ESP But nowadays, many people actually, really, many students especially, they learn Python in their schools. And so MicroPython is really a good option, good entry point for these students, especially if they are trying to program a microcontroller. Now, MicroPython is very beginner friendly, but at the same time, it can be as powerful as you want it to be. So really, it's a very good choice. And MicroPython actually supports many different microcontrollers. So if you go to the micropython.org website, and if you go to the download section, you would see actually it supports many different microcontrollers, and there are plenty of microcontrollers. And if you have a modern microcontroller like an STM microcontroller or an ESP microcontroller, it is probably supported by MicroPython. So you first thing that you have to do, you have to understand, or you have to know precisely which microcontroller you have. Notably, if you have a regular Arduino that has something like an Atmega 328P or something like that, MicroPython does not support those 8-bit microcontrollers. Other than that, if you have a 32-bit microcontroller, you are probably good to go. All right. So first of all, you need to look into the microcontroller that you have. So currently, I have an ESP32 S3 microcontroller. Doesn't matter if you have a regular ESP32, it will still work. If you have an ESP32 C6 or C3, or even a newer ESP32 P4 MicroPython still supports these microcontrollers. It's an 8-year support, meaning you pretty much have the most amount of support. All right. And similarly, if you have an STM microcontroller, namely an STM32F4 or something like that, ESP32, MicroPython also supports those. But that's beyond the scope of today's video. We are specifically looking into ESP32. So let's get into it. So I have an ESP32 S3. So if I go into that, I see there are, like, once again, there are several options. I don't exactly am finding the board that I have. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go for the generic ESP32 S3. All right, and if I look carefully on the board that I have, I see that this is an ESP32 S3 N16R8. Right, so it has an internal flash of 16 megabyte, and then you have an I have an SPI RAM, octal RAM of 8 megabyte. So I just have to remember that as well in this case. So as you see, if I go to the download option, like, there are several options, and among these options, I am going to be choosing this one, like the option for where I have octal SPI RAM, because this one has octal SPI RAM. And in case, let me go back, in case you have a regular ESP32, like the cheap one, the regular ESP32 room module or something like that, you have that option here. You go to that one, you select this one, and you download the particular firmware for that. So let me once again get back to this one, the ESP32 S3. I go to the regular one, and here some options are given. I'm going to tell you how to actually uh, have a full-fledged IDE setup for doing MicroPython programming. There are several other videos on YouTube that will teach you the beginner-friendly way, but those methods actually will get in your way when you are trying to do some advanced stuff with this. But in any case, so I'll be downloading uh, the bin file from this, right? Because you probably have seen that many of these like methods, the way we actually write these into the microcontroller actually supports this bin file. So I'm going to download the bin file, but I'm going to specifically download this option. The latest release of MicroPython as of this video is 1.28, the version 1.28. So I'm going to download that one, and I'm going to specifically download the bin file. So what I should actually do, I should create a folder, and in that folder, I should download everything. So I'm going to create a folder for this. So I'm going to create a folder, and inside that folder, I'm going to save this file. Now, before we can actually flash this onto our ESP32 microcontroller, we need to do a few things, and that's very important. The first time you are doing this, it will take a bit of time to get everything set up. But once you are there, it's easy going from there. The first thing you actually need Python. And for that, you could arguably go to the python.org website and download the regular Python that way. But I would suggest against that, because there are several things that you would need to do shortly that might not be very well supported by the regular Python distribution. So what I would want you to do, I would want you to go to this website. I want you to search for MiniForge. And if you search for MiniForge, it will actually land you on this GitHub page. So I'm going to go to this one. All these links will be provided in the video description anyway. So this is the MiniForge website. And if I'm in the MiniForge website, you see that there are several, this is a mini conda distribution. And this distribution also is actually will be pulling Python packages from something called a very specific Conda repository, okay, which is called Conda Forge. So don't worry about that too much if you don't know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't matter. So I am here on MiniForge, and I'm going to actually go and go to the releases pages. And I'm using Linux, so I'll be downloading the Linux specific version. But if you're using Windows, then you shall be downloading the Windows specific version, right? So if you are using Windows, then you'll be downloading the Windows specific version. Say if you are using Windows, in this case, you just download this and install this. Okay. So if I am using Linux, I'll be downloading a Linux specific version. Doesn't matter. And if you don't get to see all of these options, you just click on that show all releases, and you look for the Windows version. And so when you find the Windows version, which yeah, here we have the Windows versions. So you download the x86 version for Windows and download and install it in a very regular manner. So I am using Linux, and I do have Linux installed here. So this one I'll be downloading. And so when you actually install this, and when you open up on Windows, you have to go to the start menu, and then open up the Miniconda or MiniForge prompt, MiniForge terminal or Miniconda terminal, whatever you get. So accordingly, you'll have to open on that. Once you do that, then you will get something like this. You will get a environment selection there as well, like something like this, the base environment. You need to go to the correct folder, and where what you can do, you can shift and right click, and you will have an option of opening a command prompt here. So you do that, and you are if you when you install the Miniconda, when you should have selected, or you should have added the Miniconda to your path. So once you have done that, you'll be able to access Python from your terminal there. So that needs to be set up correctly. First of all, once that is set up, you need to install something called ESPtool. So for this, you can do install ESPtool this way. So I'm going to use Mamba to install ESP2. Since I installed MiniForge, I have this command Mamba installed. If you have Anaconda distribution installed, you can just simply say conda install ESP tool. Or if you have pip available, you can say pip install ESP tool. So any of these things will work. Mamba is very fast. So I already have these things installed. So it doesn't matter really for me. Right. So what it is saying is that all the requested packages are already installed. I already do have ESP tool installed. So once that is fine, so again, remember that we are in that folder. We are in the folder where we have this. So on Windows, you can just in the command prompt you can write dir and you will see the file that you actually downloaded. All right. So then what you need to do, once again, go back to the MicroPython page, and there it will tell you how to actually find this out, how to actually erase the ROM and flash this. Right. So on Windows, the device will be on a certain COM port, and in order to find that out, you need to actually go go to your device manager. You need to right click on the start menu and open device manager, and on that you will have the options of select finding out where this is where the ESP, where the microcontroller is actually uh, having its port on, right? So you will have a COM1, COM2, COM3, COM4, something like that, a device like this available. So that is something you have to select. And then once you have ESPtool installed, what you can do, you can run this particular command in order to erase the flash in the ESP32 microcontroller. Don't worry about it. Like if you want to go back to using your Arduino, you can pretty easily do that as well. So this process is not irreversible. You can erase the flash without any issue. All right. So for me on this Linux device, I can figure out where the port is really. So by looking into this one, so this is definitely the TTY ACM0. And what I need to do, I need to run the ESPtool command. So I would say ESPtool, and then, so by the way, let me show you the help option. So you see that there are several options, and instead of saying port with a double dash, this port flag, I just say dash P, and that will be the uh, serial port detected properly. So yeah, let me show you a few things here. So ESPtool, and in the help you probably have seen that there are like certain options I can check. I can check about the check what we have in the device, for example. Right. So ESPtool P, and let me say this is the port. On Windows, this will be something like your COM port. Huh? So this will be COM4, COM5, whatever you get there. And so for me, this is going to be dev slash tty sem0. And on that port, I have this. And now let me run a command and say, let's say I want to see, I want to see the chip ID, for example. Right. So it is telling me the chip ID for the ESP32 microcontroller that I have here. So the details regarding this I actually got. Of course, I came here to erase the flash, and for that the command is erase flash, and it will erase the flash. Notice that it is telling me that I have 8 megabyte of PSRAM. So remember that as well. So remember that because of this, we downloaded the pretty specific version. So now it has hard reset the microcontroller that I have. So it has successfully reset the microcontroller. Now this ready for the installation of MicroPython. If you remember that I have this on Windows, by the way, you will just write dir this command to see file there. All right, and so I will now write the MicroPython firmware into this one, into the microcontroller. And in order to do that, I shall once again be using the ESPtool. Now, again, in this one, you see that I'm not going to be writing the port number, because if you just have one device connected, ESPtool usually finds out where you have that connected. So don't first try without the port number or the without the port, like just try to erase the flash just by using this command. If that doesn't work, if it does not find the device, then just specify the port specifically. Right, but I'll be specifying the port anyway. And one note that you have to remember here, that the baud rate is might be too high for the serial chip that you have on your ESP32. Sometimes this high baud rate results into an incorrect flashing of the firmware. So you might want to reduce the baud rate there. And again, this is just a one-time process. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but it will be only like you shall be wasting the time only once in this one. All right. So again, command is ESPtool, and you have to set the baud rate. And again, instead of dash baud, you can just say dash B, and I'll be using a smaller baud rate. And this is the command. Again, this is the memory offset at which you are going to be writing this. So I'm going to be using ESPtool and then baud rate. I'll be selecting the baud rate as 115200, and I'll be defining the code anyway, but you may try skipping that, and if it doesn't work, then put the port number anyway. At memory location 0, I am writing the flash, and then I'm just passing on the name of the file. So once I hit enter on that, it'll be flashing the MicroPython firmware onto the device here. Since I'm using a very low baud rate, it will take a bit of time. But as I told you, the higher baud rate might result into a failed write. So it is safer to use a smaller, lower baud rate for this one. It might take a minute or so for uploading this. All right, so the writing is complete and it has successfully verified the flash here. All right, so we have ESP32 flashed with MicroPython. Now, once I have that, now let's get into the next few steps. And these next steps are very important. Like instead of rushing into this one, let's get things set up correctly. So you need a few packages. And first of all, I suppose you are familiar with VS Code, right? Pretty much everybody is nowadays familiar with VS Code, and you probably have used VS Code for your coding purposes. And we shall be using VS Code for writing programs. But in order for your regular Python to recognize MicroPython, and in order to actually work with this, we would need a few packages. First of all, we need a package called mpremote. Okay, and this is a MicroPython library. And if I go, sorry, this is a regular Python library, and that is used to actually communicate with the MicroPython firmware on your microcontroller. There are several other ways of communicating, but this is the best way. This is the recommended way of doing it. Again, the command to install this is pip install mpremote. Alongside that, remember this one, and alongside that, I shall also be using installing the MicroPython stub. Let me show. So let me search for MicroPython stub on the PyP website and see, like, there are several MicroPython stubs. And for me, I will specifically download and specifically install the MicroPython ESP32 S3 stub. So if you just have MicroPython uh, for your ESP32, you probably are going to use MicroPython ESP32 stub. Uh, Always pay attention to the release date. Like these versions are pretty old, you probably won't be supported by your Python releases. But remember that. So if you're using a regular ESP32, probably you need to install this one. Please don't use an ESP8266, it's too old. And if you have an ESP32 S3, you need this. If you are working on a Raspberry Pi Pico, you need this. Uh, if you have an STM32 microcontroller, then you need this one. Just remember these stubs. Now, what is the stub? A stub actually has all the syntax of all the libraries that are in your MicroPython firmware that goes into your your microcontroller device. Otherwise, what's going to happen? The built-in libraries, there are several libraries that are only available on MicroPython. So if you go to the MicroPython website, what I mean, I will show you what I mean. For example, if you go to the MicroPython documentations, and always make sure that you are at the looking at the documentation for the version that you have installed. We have installed the version 1.28. So I'm clicking on that. I'm looking at the version 1.28 only. So there are like several libraries that are like common with the Python standard library, and there are several libraries that are not so common with the Python standard library, and this will not be actually detected by your uh, ID. Okay, in order for those to be detected correctly, and in order for auto completion to correctly work, in order for all these things to work, you actually need these stubs. That is the utility of these stubs. So you go to MicroPython ESP32 S3 stubs, not this one. I mean, I need to go through ESP32. Let me search for this one, MicroPython ESP32. Yeah, let me search for MicroPython ESP32 stub. I guess that is what I'm looking for. MicroPython ESP32, ESP32 generic S3 stubs. That is, I guess, what I'm looking for. Okay, just remember this name. So I'm installing this, and I am installing this mpremote package. Also, alongside that, for static linting, for linting to work, like the proper code highlighting, etc., to work correctly, you need a code highlighting package, for example. So for that, I shall be using Pyrite or Pylance, whatever you want to install. Okay, so I'll be installing these. So again, in our Python, inside our Python terminal, we're actually installing this mpremote and this package. I just copy the package name. All right, and also with that, I'm going to be using Pylance. As a matter of fact, Pylance is already installed, so I'm not just let me just why not? So yeah, so this is the install command. Everything, all of these packages are actually installed on my device, so that's good. I'm good to go with this. All right. So with that being said, now once we have mpremote installed, you can on your terminal ideally just say mpremote REPL. Okay. REPL stands for read, execute, print loop. And should drop you into the MicroPython REPL on your microcontroller device. Let me try. And yes, as expected, I am connected with the MicroPython terminal inside the microcontroller. All right. So let me check. And the first command that you should type is help. And once you type help, you get some very basic help, for example here. All right. So with that being said, you have successfully installed uh, MicroPython on your microcontroller. In the next video, we shall see how you can configure your IDE fully. And by the way, how do you exit out of this? You just hit control and then the closing bracket. You need to hit this key with control. Okay. So control and closing bracket. So that will actually exit you out of this terminal. So once you have done this, you have successfully installed MicroPython on your microcontroller and you have successfully configured. The next video, I will show you how to configure your uh, IDE. In this case, I will show you how to configure your Visual Studio Code to recognize MicroPython correctly and to also be able to use GitHub Copilot for actually coding our MicroPython programs into our microcontroller. So thank you so much. I will see you in the next video.